Hey, good morning, Pete, North Las Vegas. We're going to get this M16A2 retro, see if we can get the lower finished up. And so the first thing we're going to do today is install the A2 buttstock. A couple things to watch out for, and I'll mention them as we go along. I'm using a metal spacer instead of the plastic. There's some advantages to this, and there's some disadvantages to it. But we'll get into that as we start putting this thing together. So let's get this tube spun on. I'm going to put my retainer in just to make sure that, you know, we got enough engagement. So I'm just doing everything dry for now. And then once I'm satisfied that everything fits or any adjustments that need to be made are done, we'll come back and take it all apart and put some grease and oil on things. So right now we'll get the retainer in there. And we'll screw this tube in and make sure that we have proper engagement to keep that retainer in place. Okay, so that looks good. You can see that the tube doesn't extend past the receiver. We're almost like perfectly flush, the edge of the buffer tube here with the receiver. So that's all good. Let's see how the stock fits. Let's say, okay, so the A2 buttstock is 5/8 of an inch longer compared to the A1 buttstock. But what they did back then was, instead of redesigning the tube and making the tube 5/8 longer, they just kept the same A1 length dimension, and then you got to use a 5/8 spacer. So we'll slide the spacer in and slide this on, and we'll get this screw snugged up and see how things go. Okay, so I have this just kind of snugged up, and it's got a reasonable amount of tension. It's not turning real easy here when I grab hold of the buttstock. But one of the things you want to listen for is any rattle between that spacer and your butt plate. And right now, you can probably hear that. So what that means is that spacer is not making contact with the butt plate. And like I said, I just kind of have this snugged up a little bit right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a little bit more on it, but I don't want to over tighten it because this is plastic. And that countersunk hole will deform. And if you over tighten that over time, this butt plate, that countersunk piece of plastic may crack on you. So you don't want to over tighten this. And I'm going to put a little bit more on it. And like I said, if I can't get rid of the rattle, that means there's too much space between the tube, the spacer, the butt plate, and the screw. And then we'll talk about what I do to adjust that. Okay, so I snugged it up some more. I don't feel like I've over tightened it yet. I've gotten rid of most of the, almost all of the movement between the buttstock and the receiver. I really have to crank on it to move it. So we can go a little bit snugger, but I can still kind of hear that spacer moving around a little bit. Now, if you have your buffer in here, this is what you're going to hear. So you want to do this without your buffer in there. Okay, so I'm going to snug this up just a little bit more to where I don't feel like I'm going to damage that plastic butt plate, and see if we can get rid of that rattle. Okay, so I can still hear it. So early morning, I'm not hitting on all cylinders. Also, something else that could rattle while you're checking that spacer engagement is your trap door. And this is a Fulton Armory A2, and this is a metal trap door using an A1 style latch, but it works. This is how they come from Fulton Armory. So I'm going to pull the screw back out, and I'm going to show you how I fix this this tolerance problem. Okay, so what we need to do to make an adjustment is we need to space the spacer, but we don't want to space it too far this way, because then we won't be able to get this tight enough up against the receiver. So it's kind of a balancing act to try to find the right size spacer to fit in here, and just ever so slightly move this out to where the butt plate makes full engagement and keeps this thing from rattling. So the trick I used was, I'm into dirt biking also, and I got aluminum drain plug washers, and these are soft tempered. So what I'll do is I'll find the one that fits the best back here, and then I'll take a ball peen hammer and start tapping this down and thinning it out, because these are pretty thick. And I'll keep tapping it down until I get this adjustment to where there's no rattle, but I still get enough, tightness with the screw to keep everything together. So we'll grab a washer here, see which one is going to fit the best. And what I do is I find one with a little bit smaller diameter that fits in here, because as you tap that aluminum washer down, it's going to grow, it's going to flatten out. So let's find one that fits the best. Okay, so this one seems to fit the best. I got a little bit of room to grow on the OD and the ID, so we don't pinch the screw. And like I said, as we flatten this out with a ball peen, it may take me a few tries to get this just right. But let me put it together right now, just the way it is, just to show you how it gets rid of the rattle. Okay, so with the aluminum washer in there on this aluminum metal spacer, you can see that gap has increased quite a bit, and that's going to be way too much. But just to show you that where we're at, so when I get done tapping on that thing and making the adjustments, we'll take a look at the difference. Okay, so the butt plate screw it's snugged pretty good, and you can see that spacer I put in there is way too much. So like I was saying earlier in the video, I'm going to have to go out and take a ball peen hammer, and because that's a soft aluminum washer, I can tap it down and I can get this thing adjusted towards everything fits perfect and has just the right amount of tension. Okay, so I explained what you might want to do with the aluminum drain plug washer idea. But what I'm going to do this time around is I'm going to use a muzzle device shim kit from Surefire. And this way I don't have to go back and forth and keep making adjustments on that aluminum washer. We'll just find the right combination of muzzle device spacers, and you can see they fit in there pretty good. So let's try that. Okay, so here's the aluminum washer we started out with, which left way too much gap, which gave us the opposite problem of what we started with. And we're going to start out with this Surefire one here that's fairly thick. Let's measure it and see where it comes in. Okay, so the Surefire muzzle shim comes in at 20 thousandths. So I think this one here all by itself might do the trick. Yeah, pretty good fitment. Let's slap this thing together and see what happens. Okay, so everything is fully engaged. Screw, butt plate, butt pad, whatever you want to call it, stock, and enough tension on the receiver to where when I grab this and the receiver and try to twist, there's no movement. And it feels like I could probably go a little bit tighter on that. So over time, as that plastic butt pad takes a set, there's room to snug it up just a little bit more. So I think that 20 thousandths on this one did the trick. Okay, so a couple more things to check before I do the final torque on the buffer tube and get all this put together kind of semi-permanently. And that's, I'm going to put the spring and the buffer in, and I'm going to use my M Forgery upper to check for a couple of clearances on this lower receiver before, like I said, I finalize all the tightening. Okay, so I'm pretty good about remembering to mention this in all my videos when you're doing a build. The back of the bolt carrier group needs to engage that buffer enough to push the bottom of the buffer off that retainer pin at the bottom of the receiver when these two halves are pushed together. And on this particular rifle here, let me get my camera angle better. You can see that this engagement is good. All right, I went too fast. Sorry about that. Okay, so you can see as it comes down, it's pushing the buffer off of that retainer pin. Now, if there's not enough engagement, something else I talk, and I know you guys may be having trouble seeing that, but that buffer's coming off the retainer quite a bit. So that dimension is good. Now, if this is something else I mentioned in most of my videos. If that relationship is incorrect, when you close your receiver halves with the BCG in here and you do not get enough engagement to push that buffer off of that retainer pin, there is a way to fix that. And let me show you real quick. Okay, so when you close your receiver halves, if you're not getting enough engagement to push that buffer off of the retaining pin, when you close the two halves together, they sell these things called offset retainers. And you can see where the pin is on the very edge, which allows that buffer to come out quite a bit more so that your BCG engages and pushes it off, pushes the buffer off of the pin. And you can see it has a step cut. And that step cut is what keeps it located so it can't rotate. And that step cut is engaged by the buffer tube edge. So if you install this correctly, you get your buffer tube edge properly located on that step. That's what keeps it from rotating and keeps the pin located forward. So this is probably the easiest and cheapest fix if you have this problem. Other than trying another BCG or trying to come up with something else creative. That's the easiest fix right there, an offset retainer pin. Okay, so I've shown this in a couple of videos, but I kind of routinely fail to mention it. At some point on my builds, I remember to check it, usually before I fire the rifle. But this gas key clearance here, between the upper receiver, what you want to do is shove your carrier in and make sure that you have enough clearance. Like I said, between the back of that gas key and your receiver. And the general rule of thumb is if you've got 2 quarters, coins, you have plenty of clearance. I've never had this problem on any of my rifles, but I know that every now and then it does exist. So I'm going to put this in the receiver and we'll make sure we have enough clearance. I'm going to bottom this thing out. Okay, so I got my BCG bottomed out, pushing as hard as I can against it. Plenty of clearance on this one. Okay, so we're getting ready to put the buffer tube back on. I'm going to lubricate the threads. I use white grease. It's lithium based. It'll be fine. However, I'm going to tell you the way the Marine Corps says to do it. All right. Marine Corps says lubricate threads of lower receiver extension with molybdenum disulfide grease. So let's go see what that is. Appendix D. And damn book. Sorry about the camera work. I'm a disaster this morning. Okay, so there's the grease, the mil spec number that they want you to use on a receiver. And that's Aeroshell 64. And like I said, this stuff, I looked it up, and it's lithium based. And also, if you're going to do it right, 35 to 39 foot-pounds. Okay, I haven't talked about the spring and the detent yet when you put this A2 buttstock on, because I always do the 440 set screw modification on all my lower receivers. You can see the little set screw in there that captures the spring and the detent for the rear takedown pin. So one less thing to worry about during assembly, or if you ever decide to take it apart, you won't have things flying across the room. Okay, so back to lubricant. Don't be like me, use Aeroshell. There's one video floating around that's by a well-known retailer, and this individual used Loctite on this buffer tube and receiver, and I would strongly recommend against Loctite if you ever plan on getting this thing back apart without using heat. Aeroshell is probably your best bet. Some type of high-quality lithium grease would be your next. If you don't have any of that, then coat the threads with some oil, but put some kind of lubrication on there. And this will help this thing from getting seized up over time and reduce the possibility of corrosion. Okay, so I torqued mine at 35, and I used a good, decent quality crow's foot, 5/8 Craftsman, back when everything was actually made in the USA. You might have noticed on the crow's foot, it's 5/8. That's your dimension back here. You really want to use a vise block. I don't know how else you could get that thing torqued. And this will help, prevent damaging your receiver. So these are real handy. Okay, so this is another area where people are going to disagree. The Marine Corps manual just calls this screw a self-locking screw. Maybe it's supposed to have some kind of concave type locking washer. I don't know. All of my newer rifles, it's just a screw. But I put a little bit of lubrication on the threads. Like I said, you're going to have some disagreement where people say to use Loctite, or once again, you're putting a steel screw into aluminum, so that's dissimilar metal. So I would say, my opinion is just, I put lube on it, just a small amount. Okay, you've probably seen me take this screw off and on about 6 or 7 times now in the video, and you can see there's absolutely no damage to that slot. And that's because I'm using the correct hollow ground blade tip, the correct thickness, and the correct width. So this is a little bit short on width, but the blade thickness fits in that slot nice and snugly, so it's less likely to slip out and damage the threads. So anyway, we're going to get the rest of this thing put together and get it all snugged up. Okay, so this is just something I like to do, and if you think it's a waste of time, or I'm not telling you to do it, but what I'll do is I'll come in with a very fine tooth file, nothing coarse. If you use something coarse on here, like coarse sandpaper or a coarse file, you're going to make that ugly. But I'll come in at a 45 and just ever so slightly break that sharp edge. Just a couple of swipes is all it takes. And like I said, something very fine tooth, or some very, very fine sandpaper, if that's what you're going to use. And you don't want to come in at this angle here. You want to be more at a 45 or even further. Like I said, just something I like to do. So let me get that smoothed out a little bit and get this buttstock on. Okay, so the buttstock's on there for the last time. Everything's snugged. I grabbed a hold of the buttstock and the receiver and tried to twist. No movement. No damage to the screws. Everything's a good solid fit. Plenty of engagement on the butt pad, buttstock, that spacer, the buffer tube. Everything is snug after we got it properly shimmed. So anyway, that's how I do the A2. No rattle. So we're going to get some other bits and pieces here. There's plenty of videos on YouTube, even a lot of my older videos where I show all the steps to getting the selector in and the trigger. If you watched a couple of videos ago, I ordered 2 of these from Primary Arms. One of them showed up without the hammer. So this is the replacement that I got from Primary Arms. Kind of odd. All right, well, let's get this thing put back together and get this lower finished up. All right, so this is the final progress report for today. I already mentioned it. This buttstock is nice and snug. No gaps. Doesn't twist. I have this screw snugged up pretty well, but I'd say I could probably go another 1/8 1/4 inch tighter if I needed to. So when the plastic butt pad maybe takes a set, and I still have room to snug it up a little bit more. And like I said, no twisting. This is that JSE Surplus upper that is machined by Double R Armory out of Texas. Very nice piece. When you guys weren't looking, I got the trigger and the selector in. Like I said, there's a boatload of videos on how to do that. And so this is what I got left. I need a barrel. We'll get the front sight base mounted by Retro Arms Works. And then this thing will be done. H&R, these are very good quality. They're round, they're not the the big ovals. So these are A2 correct, and they're very good quality. So H&R from Palmetto State Armory. All right, well, Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out.